Welcome to Being Humans. We're better together. My name is Ian Christopher Wendt. This is the second part of our discussion of how consciousness emerges from networked human relationships. There are no feral humans. Let me say that again. There are no feral humans. A fish or reptile emerges from its egg and becomes a functioning fish or shark or alligator or lizard. These animals can respond to their environments, hunt, mate, reproduce, and in some cases even swim miles and miles upstream to the same place where they were spawned to mate again. Genetics is amazing. But human children do not and cannot develop consciousness or language or healthy emotions and social awareness in isolation. We know this for a fact because under communism in Eastern Europe, there were cases where some children were left alone in cribs, given minimal nourishment and almost no human contact. They did not learn to speak and never developed into fully functional adults. This, for me, is a powerful argument against the idea that consciousness is determined or primarily shaped by the individual hardware in your brain, neural networks, or other physical systems. Consciousness is software that you learn, and it does not come from inside of individuals. It is carried by the groups of humans you have contact and relationships with. It is communicated over years through tens of thousands of words, expressions, gestures, movements, teaching and learning moments. None of us invents our own consciousness. We don't invent our language or our ideas or our complex worldviews or our values. We develop these things in constant relationship with one another. We can absolutely make decisions about how we apply our tools of consciousness and choose our individual actions. But consciousness is a highly symbolic set of dances and songs that we learn and perform together. Child rearing is consciousness development. Caregivers make humans by showing them over and over again how to communicate, respond, share, cooperate, compete, agree, disagree, problem solve. Caregivers literally teach awareness, agency, and consciousness. In particular, mothers do this the most, and our society has been undercutting this for generations to the detriment of us all. Intimacy and child rearing in the context of families, all kinds of families, are the foundation of awareness and consciousness. Intergender and intergenerational communication builds consciousness. Language is central to the rise of consciousness, learned and taught social practices. Language may be wired into the brain, but it is continually developed and evolving in organic human networks. Relational knowledge, knowing other people, is the source of consciousness. Most epistemology is relational. Epistemology is the study of how we know what we know. Almost everything meaningful that you and I know comes through contact with other people. People we know, people we trust, as well as authoritative sources, meaning people who wrote stuff down or were recorded in the past, who many people agree shared useful knowledge. Almost all meaning is symbolic. We develop this through subtle actions, through gestures, through words, through behaviors that carry symbolic meaning. Free will and consciousness are rooted in our awareness of other people. To begin with, we learn from our first gods, our parents, caregivers, and nurturers as helpless children. We learn so many basic things: body control, forms, objects, acting on the world, self-care, self-control, choice, agency, words, language, playing, singing, dancing, consequences, causation, categorization, critical thinking. Second, we learn about the ever-expanding world from our peers and from authorities, a world we could not possibly discover on our own. We know so much because we benefit from the stories that other people tell us all the time. We are constantly consuming stories, news, information, articles, narratives, videos, memes, movies, songs. All of these stories we pass around. Indeed, almost everything you discover was taught to us half a dozen times by our complex environmental community of peers first, before we eventually had that aha moment of discovery. Next, we crave communion, cooperation, and harmonic interaction with other human beings. We strive to connect, make contact, to communicate, understand and be understood, to cooperate, to unite, to be intimate, to make friends, to bond, to love with those special people in our lives and that one special person. It's through this process that we experience and develop consciousness shared between us. We choose, they choose, together, the same, freely. This is the magic of relationships. This is the magic of many forms of resonating human interactions. You choose to act. They choose to act in response. Back and forth. You agree. You resonate to ideas, laughter, conversation, shared emotions. You pass your ideas and experiences and feelings back and forth. You agree and add to the combined magic between you. You spontaneously respond emotionally, physically, socially to things together. You form, build, and develop knowledge about each other and create a relationship. This is the root of knowing, awareness, and consciousness. As we experience joy, pleasure, and sharing, we understand the world around us. When you were a small child, you did this spontaneously and immediately. You met another child and played with them wholeheartedly. As we grow older, our relationships can grow and deepen, but our boundaries and safety mechanisms also thicken. We aren't as open to new relationships and resonance with people that we don't know. But we shouldn't forget or abandon the connections and relationships that helped us become who we are. Next, I want to alter and expand our frame of discussion. So far, we've approached consciousness from the frames or perspectives of philosophy and science and relationships. But many of the people that I know simply answer the question of consciousness by saying, I have a spirit or a soul, so obviously that is what makes me conscious. Or, I'm a conscious agent because God created me and Adam and Eve ate the fruit of the tree of knowledge of good and evil. Or, I'm conscious because I'm a child of God with a divine spark or spirit capable of awareness and making choices. So let's briefly consider the spiritual perspective on consciousness. This change in frame takes us into a dualistic view of reality and consciousness. The scientific and philosophical frames that we were discussing previously seek building blocks, forces, and causes that can be identified in the world, measured, tested, and explained. It is a physical frame, a singular frame. The religious or spiritual frame in many religious traditions divides the universe into physical and spiritual aspects. The physical aspect is usually considered limited, temporal, contextual, and lower than the spiritual. The spiritual aspect is elevated as eternal, infinite, and true. In this context, we often refer to mind, body, and spirit. Even without considering the spiritual matters, philosophers of issues of consciousness consider the mind-body problem. Is the mind separate from the physical brain or body? There are a host of fascinating issues that people tease out here. We've already argued that consciousness or mind is generated and developed in connections and relationships between human beings. Thus, I strongly agree that mind is more than individual brain or body. But let's consider what is the role of spirit. Most people believe that they have a spirit or a soul. Most people believe in ghosts and an afterlife, even if they make no claims about religion or eternity. From my earliest childhood, I was taught that I had a spirit that was in the image of God, and that my proper purpose was to emulate the character, actions, and ways of God with my choices, actions, and character. This is a powerfully uplifting idea. It's also a very challenging goal that we never attain in this life. I have personally dedicated a significant portion of my life to studying the religious principles and practices of the world's religions, particularly the Abrahamic traditions, Christianity, Judaism, and Islam, as well as the traditions of India and China. Each of those traditions provides profound and sometimes divergent ideas about human nature, divine nature, ideal human value hierarchies and ways of living, and the purposes of life. Near the end of this group of episodes, we will consider how the Genesis creation myth and the Hindu Sankhya creation philosophy can shed light on consciousness. At a later time, we will make opportunities to explore many different religious and philosophical traditions, how they evaluate human nature, divine nature, and ideal human ways of living, particularly from the perspective of human relationships and communities. But in this context, it's useful to recognize that religious perspectives generally divide reality in two: the physical and the spiritual. And most spiritual traditions elevate the spiritual over the physical. Some people like to boldly claim that there is no such thing as spirit or soul. As we will discuss in the next group of episodes about binding energy and the uniqueness and beauty of life, this perspective seems narrow-minded. I frequently have experiences that my community of believers describe as spiritual experiences. Those experiences affirm that we human beings are bound together and that our consciousness seems capable of touching something transcendent and exalting. So I absolutely believe I have a spirit or a soul, and that you do also. Many of my beliefs are not orthodox, and I don't want to begin my efforts to help you gain a greater awareness, meaning, encouragement, and empowerment with debates about religious doctrine. To be honest, I have been inspired by a whole variety of public intellectuals and people who share on these topics, who strive to mix the philosophical, psychological, historical, scientific, and religious in their efforts to communicate and speak to our shared cultural and societal moment. I thank Jordan Peterson, Jonathan Pajot, Paul Vanderklay, Andrew and Spencer Clavin, Jordan Hall, and many, many others for broadening my horizons and opening my mind to new views. What these and so many other voices have in common in their approach to communicating in our 21st century society is an effort to embrace a range of philosophical and methodological approaches, and to lean rather heavily on efforts to describe the world in terms of what we can see, observe, measure, reason over, and respond to directly. That doesn't reject the spiritual or the religious. Indeed, several of those who inspire me are openly religious, but they don't rest their arguments on authoritative doctrines or priesthood traditions. Now, elevating our sense of consciousness, self-awareness, and purposeful, meaningful actions and decisions to connect them with God and spiritual things has a couple of key, useful effects. First, it idealizes our sense of who we are, who we can be, and who we ought to be. This uplifting of our sense of self and our purpose can reorient us from mundane, less useful, more selfish thoughts and actions toward idealistic goals that uplift ourselves and the people we care about. Second, our religious or spiritual formulations of consciousness are usually passed down to us or taught to us through ancient wisdom traditions. Those traditions can provide us with very useful principles, ideals, goals, and priorities. Those practices, pathways, and traditions have been practiced for centuries in evolving communities of human beings. The truth is that we're often naive and foolish when we do things on our own without the benefit of feedback or the experience of other people. So, if you believe, like many people do, that you have a soul or spirit and that your consciousness resides eternally there, I affirm your belief. If you're not really sure about spirits, souls, and afterlife, then I say keep an open mind. But either way, there is plenty in the world to convince us that we are conscious, that our consciousness matters, and that we can become more conscious, more aware, and more capable of exercising our will to accomplish useful, constructive goals toward the end of living a life of meaning and purpose. I want to wrap this up by describing how consciousness is a symbolic dance. We all communicate, use language, gestures, expressions, images, memes, music, and other symbolic expressions to share ideas, thoughts, concepts, intentions, plans, values, principles, etc. Too often, we forget the symbolic nature of almost all meaning. We take things too literally. I'm using words to communicate with you. Words can be described using letters, but most often we make sounds. You can tell the difference between words and gibberish. You can tell which ones are words, which ones are not. All kinds of things have symbolic meanings. Gestures can be powerful symbols. If I were to raise my arm and point my fingers together, many people would be deeply offended and call me a Nazi. If I were to raise my middle finger to the camera, I would also offend many people, and this video would likely be banned. Words and gestures are symbols. We share the meaning together, between us. Communication is a form of magic. The ability to move ideas from my mind to your mind through making sounds, gestures, or manipulating symbols like letters or numbers is powerful and absolutely symbolic. The squiggle that makes up the number 8 or the infinity symbol is not inherently meaningful. We share the symbolic meaning and understanding of that squiggle between us. All of conscious life is that way. You and I have been initiated into human consciousness through the hard work, sacrifice, and hopefully love of many, many people. We have relationships with, we are bound to many of those people, both living and dead. The scientists who want to dissect consciousness have exposed a variety of the neural hardware and cognitive processes that contribute to sense perception, brain function, and responses to the world. But the nature of consciousness is emergent. It is millennia old. We are blessed to participate in the symbolic meanings of language, culture, wisdom, community, and society. Consciousness is truly a symbolic dance that we have the opportunity to participate in. We should celebrate it while we live. We should try to expand its scope and meaning for ourselves and everyone we know and love. And whether we live again and again, or are raised in immortality or not, we are alive and conscious now. And that's beautiful, meaningful, and precious. My friend, connect with your people today. Your friend, your sister or brother, your parent or child. Laugh, play, work together. Choose to build and share the best kinds of experiences and awareness together. And please join us. Like, subscribe, comment, share. Thank you. Amen, amen. This is the way of being humans together.